Welcome to Self-Evident Truth with the Grumpy Old Vet, episode 18. This one may be a little bit longer than the rest of them because I've got some things to get off my chest. It's time for me to go through just kind of a little bit of what I've been going through here in Hillsdale County uh, for the past 12 years. In 2012, I decided to run for sheriff, and I put my paperwork in. Scott Hotshire put his paperwork in because we both had known that Stan Burkhart wasn't going to run again. There was a rumor that Stan's health was bad and he was going to step down. But when Scott and I put our paperwork in, Stan Burkhart decided to run, and I couldn't figure why. Now, JJ was the undersheriff up until 2010, and then they moved him out and brought Bill Worley in, who was the under chief of the city, is now the undersheriff. Now, the rumors that I'd heard was that Bill was unelectable. They thought Bill was unelectable. And their plan that I caught later was that Stan was going to get elected. And then after he was sworn in about February, he was going to step down because of that for health reasons. And then the plan was JJ was also the campaign manager for the person that they were going to try to get as probate judge. And then that probate judge was going to then swear Bill Worley in as the sheriff, and he'd be the incumbent sheriff then coming in the next election cycle in 2016. And they did that because the rumor was that they thought that Bill was unelectable. Well, after the primary, when I lost and Scott lost, and JJ was not able to set the probate judge, Bill Worley went that next day to Hillsdale College as the head of security. Now, granted, this is just rumor that I've picked up from people at the sheriff's department and things that were going on. People like to talk at the water cooler, right? So right after that, JJ was estranged from all of his brothers at that point in time because he decided to be the campaign manager for Stan Burkhart and another candidate rather than the campaign manager for his brother Scott. So after that, while that was going on, there was a candidate forum at the Davis Middle School, and Eric Macy was the one that was the MC. And there was a bunch of us candidates that were running for township, county board, sheriff, prosecutor, a lot of people. And they said, okay, we're going to start at this time. And my question was, are we going to say the Pledge of Allegiance? And they said, no, we don't have time for that. So when it came time for the sheriffs to give their 2-minute spiel about themselves, Stan got up and gave his, Scott got up and gave his. As a military person, I didn't feel that it was right that we started this governmental function, basically, without a Pledge of Allegiance. And so I took my 2 minutes. I said, I'm going to take my 2 minutes to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So I had the whole crowd stand up and we said the Pledge of Allegiance. We went back and sat down at our seats. Scott looks over at me and he goes, oh man, that was a great move. I wish I'd have thought of that. And I thought to myself then, wish you'd have thought of it. It wasn't a political ploy. As someone who served in the military, the Pledge of Allegiance is very important to me. And I thought we should have started with that. So I did it because it was the right thing to do, not because it was some political ploy. So that gave me a little insight at that point in time. When Scott and I lost in the 2012 primary, Scott called me down to his house in Camden. And in his garage, he told me about how J.J. Hodshire, his brother, had been an illegal undersheriff for 10 years. And so I went to Marty Cass's office and I asked to see the sheriff's book. And sure enough, here's JJ's swearing paperwork, and it has no M. Coles or Malazzi number on it. I asked her if that was right, and she said, well, let's look and see another one. So we looked for another one. Of course, there wasn't one on that one either. So, of course, I FOIA'd that paperwork. I've got that paperwork. After that was done, I brought that to light, and that kind of started the whole ball downhill. In fact, JJ, when he was an illegal undersheriff, and I was told this by one of the command staff at the sheriff, Sheriff Burkhart was told by uh, Jennifer Granholm that JJ couldn't be his undersheriff because he didn't have an MCOLS certification, which is required by law. And also, he was told by the head of the Sheriff's Association that he couldn't make JJ his undersheriff. But he did it anyway because he figured he was an ex-state cop. He had an MCOLS number, so he didn't need to follow the law with an undersheriff with an MCOLS number. So he made that decision on his own. I get this from command staff, former command staff. Uh, so you can see there was a lot of things that weren't being followed and weren't being paid attention to at that point in time. So I put a spotlight on it. They didn't like that. Um, JJ's other brother called me and told me that while he was going through his training records, he found some training records, and this was when Lieutenant Parker was the training officer. He found paperwork that said um, his name, AKA, or also known as Jeremiah J. Hodshire. And so he said, "What's this all about?" Well, come to find out, because Jeremiah didn't have an MCOLS number, when Jeremiah had to file paperwork as the undersheriff, he used his brother's MCOLS number. That's not right. That's fraud. Now, what I'm telling you is things that have been told to me by these people. And under oath, I will say who those people were. And I will produce documents that I have. So that was in 2012. In 2016, um, I decided to run for sheriff. And uh, Lieutenant Parker had told some uh, uh, huge lies about me, and him and his family continue to do that to this day. And while Tim Parker was sheriff, his undersheriff, Carl Albright, had forged Stephanie Kaiser's signature in July of 2019. Now nobody knew it. They'd had a pretty good cover up on it. No, nothing was said. Um, and then I happened to be running the Republican Party booth at that time at the fairgrounds, and Stephanie had come in on Monday from 2 to 4, I believe, to help blow up balloons. And so her and I were blowing up balloons that we were handing out. And someone very closely related to um, uh, Carl Albright had seen Stephanie and I talking. And what I was told from someone at the sheriff's department was that that person went back then and told the sheriff, um, uh, Rutan knows, and he's going to use it as political fodder. So they scurried around and they came up with a story. In fact, Corey Murray, the reporter for the Hillsdale Daily News, told me that Sheriff Parker called him sometime around 9 o'clock that night and said, "Be in my office tomorrow morning. I've got some news that I have to put out." So that next morning, when Corey got there, the story was that Carl only did it because he couldn't get a hold of Stephanie, and he was doing it to save the taxpayers thousands of dollars, which turned out to be not true. And so what had happened was they found out that Stephanie hadn't said anything to me. And so a perfect cover up that they had, they let the cat out of the bag. Now that caused some very bad feelings between family members and command staff, and there was quite an upheaval in the sheriff's department, from what I've been told. Um, and so uh, the story was that he had to do it to save the taxpayers thousands of dollars. Now, in interviewing Stephanie and talking with the state treasury department, the paper that was signed and it was Stephanie's name signed the way Stephanie would sign her name, and she didn't know that it happened until the Ford Motor Company contacted her, was an IRS paper stating that Hillsdale was a governmental agency and thereby didn't owe taxes on for sales tax. They told me that that paperwork never didn't even need to get filed anyway because Hillsdale is a municipal agency. They wouldn't have been charged sales tax anyway, and so that paperwork didn't even need to be sent up there. And the fact of the matter is, the sheriff's department was already in possession of a check signed by Stephanie, the treasurer, that was supposed to go to Ford Motor Company. And so that extra piece of paper that got signed, that had her name forged on, that got sent up there, didn't even need to be done. So it was always a mystery to me why it was even done. But I think it sets an idea of a culture of the command staff at that department. When that happened, there was a huge blow up, and things didn't go well. In fact, it caused one person to leave law enforcement completely. But that being said, in 2019, in October, uh, I was told by Scott's brothers that Scott wasn't going to run. And then in October 2019, he said he was going to run, and Scott called me in 2019. And he said, I wanted to tell you that I was going to run for sheriff. I wanted to tell you before it was out in the public. He said, but it's already out, so think you probably already know. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I'm just calling to make sure that we have a clean campaign with one another. And I said, Scott, I said, I ran against you in 2012. I said, was it a clean campaign then? He said, yep. I said, Scott, I'm not going to run any different. And I didn't. But Scott did, because Scott had JJ Hodshire as his campaign advisor. JJ was running his campaign. So there was a series of things that happened that, in my estimation, were a little sleazy and slimy. Uh, One was I had set up Chris Ann Hall and Richard Mack to come and give a class and train the officers if I had won the race as sheriff in 2020. When Scott called me in 2019, I said, Scott, I've got this all set up for Chris Ann Hall to come and Richard Mack to come. Promise me that if you win and I don't, that you let Richard and Chris Ann come and train the officers. It's already paid for, it's already taken care of. Promise me that. He flat out refused. So, one of the other things that happened was I happened to be in the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. I happened to be the state director. Richard Mack is the national director. He's the founder of the CSPOA. Now, in the CSPOA, we've got a lot of sheriffs that are part of the CSPOA. Some of them are Republican, some of them are Democrat. In fact, a notable one, which is Sheriff David Clark from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, he was a Democrat. So our organization isn't a political organization, it's a constitutional organization. It stands for the Constitution, and it stands for sheriffs taking their rightful place and interposing themselves between an overreaching federal, state, or local government, which is the oath they take to defend the rights of the people in their county. And so that's not a Democrat or a Republican issue. That's an American issue. That's what this country was founded on. And so um, having that kind of an organization where you've got both Democrats and Republicans involved, as I was running in 2020, there was quite a few blue dog or moderate Democrats, the FDR type Democrats, still in Hillsdale, good, hardworking, blue collar people. Not your extreme radical leftists, but normal JFK Democrats. They enjoy the Constitution as well, and they understand what the value of the Constitution is in their lives as well. So in 2020, when you've got a choice between an establishment candidate or someone who is running on the Republican ticket but believes heavily in the Constitution and is part of an organization called the CSPOA, where we have Democrats and Republicans, they knew that there was going to be Democrat votes that were going to come my way. So Wes Ludeker, who happened to be 100% well, at that point in time, he was 100% disabled and was on insurance that us taxpayers were paying for because of an accident that he had been in. And the word that I got was that he was hired or greatly influenced to run as a Democrat candidate right at the last minute. Well, the reason why they did that was to pull Democrat votes from me in the primary because Democrats in this town don't have anybody to vote for as a Democrat in a primary for sheriff in Hillsdale. It just never happens. This is why you get a lot of people that don't have um, Republican ideology that run for a lot of these positions because they know they can't win as Democrats. So that being what it was, Wes Ludeker got into the race. Now he was 100% disabled, which means that he wasn't physically able or capable of doing that job. Um, from what I understand of the insurance laws, that constitutes insurance fraud. If you're saying you're 100% disabled and can't do any job, but yet you're applying for a job, that's fraud. So, the odd thing about that was the he didn't have hardly any signs. I think I saw one handmade sign on Lake Wilson Road, and he did radio ads. Now there's two other candidates that he was running against, but all of his radio ads attacked me constantly. And I was told by a certain source that someone funded that for him to get him to run as a Democrat to pull those votes from me, so that Scott would have a better chance to win in 2020. And this person told me that that was the mastermind of JJ to do that. So um, uh, there's a lot of other details I could get into, and a lot of documents I could show you, and a lot of tape recordings I could show you, but I won't. Keep this short and sweet because I'm already worried about it going too long. But that brings us to the present. A gentleman by the name of Mark Forrester from Branch County had organized getting Chris Ann Hall to come to Branch County. And he talked to myself and John Smith about that. And I said, well, let's call Richard and see if Richard's free and see if we can get Richard and Chris Ann on the same stage because it's pretty rare to be able to get them together. So we contacted Richard Mack, Sheriff Mack, and asked him what his schedule looked like. And he said he'd be glad to come because he didn't have anything going on at that point in time. So he agreed to come. So Mark Forrester's having a dinner um, on Friday in Branch County, and it starts at 6 o'clock on Friday night, the 16th, February 16th. And Richard's going to speak there, and Chris Ann Hall's going to speak there, and Jonathan Lindsay's going to MC it, Senator Lindsay. And so then on Saturday, they were going to come to Hillsdale. Now, Chris Ann, it's a ministry for her. She's a Christian, and what she does by donation. She does it by as a ministry. She goes where God calls her to go. And so we checked around with a lot of churches, and we were turned down by a lot of churches. And so we've got the Sozo Church agreed to let us have a function there on Saturday morning from 10 to 12. And Chris Ann and Richard are going to be there on Saturday, February 17th. And I talked to Pastor Bob Laramie down to New Hope United Brethren Church in Camden. And Dennis Wainscott had talked to him, and they had showed an interest that they were open to that. And so the Pastor Laramie said he was going to meet with the elders right then soon. And so I told him I would send him some video clips of Chris Ann and what they'd be talking about. And I sent him 2 clips from her movie Non-Compliant. They were 2 minute and 10-second movie clips. And so to my knowledge, they watched that and the board agreed that they would have it there. So we went together to put the marketing together and made the flyers and put a lot of time and effort into putting it out there. And we finally got around to getting it on WCSR radio. Now, WCSR radio, as soon as they started putting it out, they were playing it really good, and we appreciate that from WCSR. But I get a call this morning, late morning, after we'd done all this marketing, and Pastor Laramie tells me, as soon as I answered the phone, I said, "Hey, Pastor, how's it going?" And he said, "Well, I'm afraid I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with you." Right then I said, "Pastor, please don't tell me that you're backing out after I spent 3 weeks of marketing and doing all this to get people to come." There was a lot of people from Indiana that were going to come to this. And he said, "Well, we can't hold an event like that at the church." Okay, an event like that. What was an event like what? They're going to talk about the Constitution and the constitutional power of the sheriff. That's what they were going to talk about, and how that's the people's first line of defense, and making sure that the Constitution provides those guarantees that are in the Bill of Rights to our rights. He said, "Well, we can't have a program like that." So as I talked to him further, he says to me, "Well, I feel like this was misrepresented to us." I'm thinking, misrepresented? I said, "How is this misrepresented? We sent you videos. We let you take it to the board of elders. You guys voted on it. Everything was fine." He said, "Well, I've done further research into this. We can't do this at the church." And I'm thinking, further research? Now, you can do your own research. Check out Richard Mack, check out Chris Ann Hall, use DuckDuckGo or Google, I don't care which. You're not going to find anything political in anything that they say. It's all the Constitution, always. So I'm thinking, why? What research did he find? So then I find out that you can guess who pressured the church and said, well, this is just a campaign. Um, this is a campaign tactic by Rutan to run for sheriff. Well, first off, I haven't applied to run for sheriff. I haven't announced that I'm going to run for sheriff. They were coming to give classes on the Constitution and how we, as the people, stand up to an obviously out of control federal government and an out of control state government, and how we do that, how we're non-compliant, how we stand up to the government that we hire. See, the government is created by us, and they only have just power by our consent. When we no longer consent, they no longer have just power. And there's ways to do that, and there's constitutional ways to do that. That's what this was going to be about, is people's constitutional rights. How do you stand against an out-of-control government, federal and state and local? Because we know we got some problems locally. $15 million for a courthouse roof, and then we're looking to buy another piece of land and build another building to have 3 courts in it when we just spent $15 million on a roof. Come on, tell me that's not out of control. So at the last minute, we're screwed. We put all this time and effort in. We've got a lot of people that have called to RSVP that now we have to contact. A lot of people are going to be coming to Camden to the New Hope United Brethren Church for this program. So Trine University found out about it, and some good friends of mine in law enforcement in Steuben County. Trine University, knowing that these are two nationally renowned speakers on the Constitution, were more than happy to provide a place for us to go for their Back the Blue. And so now the one that was going to be at the Camden United Brethren, the Camden or the New Hope United Brethren Church, is now being moved to Trine University at their big theater down there. Um, and that seats 350 people. And they were tickled to death. They were very excited to have these two nationally renowned constitutional speakers to come and talk on their Back the Blue. Um, so that's going to happen on Saturday, the 17th at 3 o'clock at Trine University. If you can make it, I would highly suggest you come. Now, I know what's going on. In 2020, when the Chinese flu was going around that everybody was afraid of, and yes, Scott Hodshire hid in his basement or hid in his house for about 7 weeks with a mask on because he was scared to death of the flu. And in 2020, and I was campaigning, and when I started campaigning, getting signs out, then all of a sudden he wasn't afraid anymore and got out and started putting out signs. He tried to convince everybody in 2020, oh, because of the flu, please, nobody campaign. Look, I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid to die. Death is not a fear of mine because I know where my eternity is, so I'm not afraid of death. And I also understood viruses, and I knew we were being lied to, and I wasn't gonna fall for it, and I didn't. So in 2020, Julie Games, who was a county commissioner at the time, and who with she always put on the Fourth of July parade, and she had announced that because of the Chinese flu and the scare that they weren't going to have a Fourth of July parade in 2020. I'm a veteran. I've had family that have died for this country. I've had good friends that have died for this country. And as a veteran, I couldn't see us not celebrating our declaration to a candid world, the reasons why we declared ourselves independent from the state of Great Britain, and no longer subjects under the king, but subjects under the law. I couldn't I couldn't go for it. So myself and uh, Mayor Stockford decided we'd put the the parade on, and so we did the parade. Well, Julie Games and that ilk from that side that decided to sue me went around telling everybody that that was a Rutan for Sheriff campaign event, not to go to it because I was just doing it because I was running for sheriff. That's not true. I invited every candidate that was running in 2020, all of them. Now, some chose not to come. That's their choice. But I invited everyone to that parade because it was a celebration of our independence. And somebody said, well, you're just turning it into a political parade. Well, tell me how the 4th of July isn't somewhat political anyway when we're celebrating telling one government we no longer belong to them and saying that we've created our own government. It's political in nature. And typically, all politicians show up for 4th of July parade who wouldn't celebrate the country for what they're going to take an oath to the Constitution if they're elected and serve the people of their constituency. Why would they not want to be involved in a 4th of July parade? So I knew what was going on. This is exactly what they did in 2020. They're doing it now. They're trying to turn this event that we had for people to come and learn about the Constitution and learn what their rightful place is as the master of the law, as Lincoln told us we were, and how the government is a fixture that we, the people, have created. It's just like in Texas. Everybody's going, well, how can Texas defend the border? They can't go against the president. Federal's higher than state. No. See, there's three branches of government that were created by the Constitution, and the states were the parties. The people in the several states, the states themselves were the parties to the contract known as the Constitution that created a product, which was three branches of government, one of them being the office of the presidency. So federal government owns their existence to the states, not the other way around. The only power that the federal government has is power that has been delegated to them from the state. See, when we were under the Articles of Confederation, each state was the same as any country. They were the same as Spain, the same as England, the same as France, the same as any country. They had the ability to uh, go to war, create peace, negotiate treaties, and collect foreign commerce. Every state did. But our founders knew that if those states stayed in the Articles of Confederation, that we didn't come up with a united states with a federal government that had certain powers, those powers delegated to them, that the United States would fall to the ravages of what happened in Europe, where you had all these countries that were warring against each other all the time, on bordered with each other. They didn't want that to happen. And so that's what this is about, is understanding the true meaning of the Constitution, for people to understand what their rightful place as the masters of the law are. This has nothing to do with politics, Republican or Democrat. Has everything to do with the Constitution. Now, a lot of people go, "Well, that Rutan, he's extreme right wing." No, I'm constitutional. The Constitution is top dead center. Everything else is to the left and the right of that. The Constitution is very clear, and it's something that we have lost sight of, and we as people have been horrible masters of for a very long time. And this is why we're seeing the great convulsions in our country that we're seeing. And that's what this is really all about. So I haven't talked about this stuff openly like this, and I've had some people go, "Oh, don't do that. People are going to think bad of you." People already think bad of me. My political opponents have sued me, not unlike Trump. They've spread lies about me, not unlike Trump. Isn't it funny, when you stand for the truth and what's right, the forces of evil that'll come after you? So, no, Scott Hodshire is also one of the ones that was on that group that voted to sue me, his political opponent. This whole thing started because Marnie Cast violated the law in 2022, and there was a bunch of them that will come out that conspired to break the law. Isn't it odd how Marnie's decided to step down, and so has Neil Brady? Well, we the people of this country have got to get it right, because if we lose our republic, there will never be another free one. I've got friends in other countries, and they worry about the state of the United States right now. They worry where it's at. And I asked one of them one time, I said, "Why are you guys protesting our 2020 election?" And they said, "Because America is the only free place there is in the world. If it goes away, there isn't any place to escape to." Think about that. So, with that, God bless Hillsdale. May God bless you, and may God bless America.